of all, a warm welcome to you all. This is like, this semester is somewhat unusual, where all of you are at your home and then trying to struggle with the coursework and all. So I'll try to interact with you to share some of my experiences and then some interesting aspects probably, hopefully. Regarding my college life, it has been a mixture in the sense that my undergraduate was from NIT Calicut, and at that time it was not a deemed university. We still had a university system in which the internal exams were conducted by the institute, and then at the end of the semester, there used to be this similar to the board exams, which was conducted by the university. So as such, it was completely different from what you experience as of now, where you do have a regular, periodic, continuous evaluation. Earlier, it was you have the stretch of classes, and then you have a break of about 1 or 1.5 months. Everyone go home, and then with the books, you prepare and come back and write exams. So that was a different system, but then it was, I should say, it had its own some charm in the sense that most of us ended up reading books a lot, because by the time you go home and before the exams, you would have forgotten whatever that has been taught in the class. So you have to get back to the textbook and read afresh and then make sense of the stuff before before the exams are going to begin. And that is also an era, so I guess all those people who are talking to me, you all are born in the new millennia, right? You are roughly half my age, maybe even less than that. So that was the time when it was, if I recollect it correctly, it was only in the final year also that we even got to see a mobile phone. That too very rarely between here and there. And even those who had the mobile phones usually had to go to the top of the terrace of the to the terrace of the hostel to get some range. So as a result, probably compared to these days, we interacted a lot more among the students, because of course the TV was there, but still people end up spending time talking to each other. Maybe that is one major difference that you would see from those days to this, in terms of here with the advance of all these devices, one can fairly choose not to interact with other human beings per se, and then spend the entire time with the gadgets. So that way it was different, and overall, it was kind of okay. I was not a very I was a reasonably serious student, but then that goes through phases. Undergrads and all, I was mostly a backbencher. Then I came to IITB for the MTech when I was a frontbencher. Then during the coursework, during the PhD and all, I again went back to the backbench and other stuff. So I was a reasonably serious student. I never created much trouble for the teachers, I should say. But then when there was no strict restriction in terms of the attendance and other things, of course, the entire batch of students enjoyed freedom a lot more as compared to probably what you guys might be. And it has its own pros and cons. So as such, it was a different era. Maybe people were not that tensed about what's going to happen if you are not performing up to a certain level and other things. But then different eras have got different demands, and as per that everything changes, right? So I'm not saying that was better, this is worse, or nothing like that, nothing in terms of comparison, but then different eras have got their own characteristics. Of progress in science and technology and other things, every once in a while, there is this one technology which comes up, creates or attracts a lot of attention and other stuff, and then after a few years, maybe something else comes. So these are you are looking at a seashore, and then once in a while there is a big wave, big sustained wave and other things. So research as such is like that. A few topics might be hot topics, quote unquote hot. They may stay for a while, and then something else will come. Lot of funding, lot of effort, and other things would be diverted to that and other things. So till the late 90s or so, if you go back and even review, probably the project that had the huge amount of, which attracted huge amount of media attention was the Human Genome Project, which was completed late 90s or so. And then at that time, by 2000s or so, the research in electrical engineering was getting into a sort of a important point. The devices were being shrunk into even smaller and smaller domains, and people were uncertain, how the technology is going to evolve. If you make it still smaller, will it going to work as well? Will the performance is going to improve and other things? So this whole business of nanotechnology and other things started to gain attraction by that early 2000s. When I say nanotechnology, it's especially from an engineering perspective, because if you look at chemists and biologists, they would have been working with stuff which is of the size of nanometer, many molecules and other stuff are on the size of nanometer and other things. But then when it's engineering or a fabrication of a device that quote unquote nanoscale regime was emerged as a major challenge only by the early 2000s or so. And at that time, there was also this concern, okay, this entire industry of electronics, by the way, my basic degree is in electronics and communication. So this entire technology of electronics is as such powered by progress in two fields. One is in terms of computers, you need more computing power that will give you more functionalities. And the other is in terms of communication, it's related to so that you can have more and more better avenues of communication. So people were worried, okay, we have been progressing at a exponential rate, and if this exponential is going to roll off, the current progress rate is going to roll off from that, you need to have more applications. It's beyond the basic computing and communication. The electronics as such should be catering, whether it's extremely small devices, whether there could be more avenues for growth if electronics was used to meet some requirements from biology. And since the devices were getting very, very small, there was this challenging problem that we came up at that time, which is electronic detection of biomolecules. And so as I finished my master's here and I applied for my PhD, that time Professor Ashraf Alam, who was with Bell Labs till then, he moved to Purdue University, and then I got an opportunity to work with him on that particular topic. And so the topic at that time was it was an emerging topic with a lot of unknown potential essentially. And so I got an opportunity like that, and that is how it all started for me. So the topic that I mentioned was essentially interdisciplinary, in the sense that you have your own expertise, say electrical engineering, making nanoscale devices and other things, but then you are trying to make it relevant for a different field, say biology or energy conversion. So it's essentially interdisciplinary research. And then there are always challenges associated with the interdisciplinary field, in the sense that one has to figure out, okay, it is similar to you are getting into a different country with a different language, and you want to converse with them. You want to figure out what is the quote unquote most interesting gossip there, such that you can converse with them. For that, you need to understand their language. You have to be able to converse with them, and then only you will be able to take part in some discussion, right? So when it comes to interdisciplinary research, the important aspect, and it's also similar in other topics also, the challenges are essentially threefold. One is that what problem you want to solve, and the second is that how would you solve, and the third is that how would you make it, how would you communicate it to the broader community, such that people notice, right? So let me repeat, the challenges when it comes to research are only can be put in three baskets: which problem you want to solve, how you solve, and then how would you communicate the results if you obtain it, right? Now, the first question is that which problem you want to solve is like essentially which field you want to work on, and then within that field, which problem, like how would you identify a problem? It takes a significant amount of effort, and it also depends upon your background training to, and then the amount of effort that you want to put into move to a slightly like closely allied field, read the literature, and then figure out, talk to people, figure out what are the questions which, if you solve, are going to grab the attention of people. And this is a all said and done, it's not very easy. Many a time it is like groping around in dark, but then it has its own charm. Like you can now, once you have tasted success doing it in with one particular topic, then you are essentially you have set yourself free. You can with sufficient preparation you can go to move to any other field and then make a difference. Then how you solve that, like you may have to depending upon whether it is experimental research or theory and modeling, different skills you might have to acquire, collaborate with different people, and solve that problem, the problem that you are after, in a hopefully in an elegant manner, and then convey it in a simple language such that most others could understand. So how to tackle this is essentially, I have sort of listed down. You have to talk to people, read, and then figure out what are the important problems, because you are investing your time, right? You are investing your time, your energy. So which problem you want to solve, and what are the prospects of that problem? So all said and done, it's easy to say, but then it takes some significant amount of effort to get to this. Yeah.
Okay, so what were your experience in the foreign? You studied abroad, and how do you see the changes? What are the changes from study abroad, and study system here, specifically IIT Bombay, and anything you might want to change in India?
Yeah, so it's a question which is which has significant amount of it probably takes some good amount of analysis to give an appropriate answer, which unfortunately I have not done, but then I can share something that I have observed, especially let's compare between various topics. When it comes to classroom teaching, we are on par, if not better, with most places, right? We teach all the topics that are there. Of course, variations are going to be there, but in terms of an average level of teaching and other stuff, we are on par. There is nothing major that we have to distinguish. The response from the students also is we are second to none. Our students ask deep, penetrating questions. We are second to none. But then there are some other aspects where there is a difference. Maybe I'll get to that. One is even more connected to the society aspects itself. Back in US and all, if you wish to change from one topic to another topic and other things, that has even more acceptance than what we have over here. People routinely change fields which are even entirely not connected to each other. And if you are driven, if you have passion, and if you have the sufficient talent, you end up achieving success. So such an aspect, unfortunately in Indian system, we don't see, we are yet to accept that at the same level as it is being accepted elsewhere. I can give specific examples also. There's a well-known personality who did her bachelor's in English and then did her PhD in physics. And then she went on to become a very famous scientist, and even many university presidentships, and even she became the director of the NSF as well. So, shifting from one to another based on what you find interesting is something that is a lot more accepted there, which is unfortunately not here. Even if you lose out 1 year and other things in your student life, there is always this question, "Barbaad kar diya exam." So, but then, so we need to be a little bit relaxed in terms of people experimenting, and then we need to be a little bit more accepting towards that. And that is like related to the society as such, not with respect to IITB. And another aspect that I would have seen, especially when it comes to research and other things, is that people are a lot more driven to achieve what is achieve their own place over in those places than compared to our student population, maybe the graduate student population in particular. That there is a lot of amount of internal drive and healthy competition, that you want to do excellent work. Maybe that will take some more time for us to that sort of a mentality to set in. It might take some more time. So there are significant differences in that. When it comes to undergraduate teaching classes and other things, I would say we are not second to none. And study is all about individual aspect, right? So study environment, in the sense that, look, you mean to ask about the classroom environment or something like that? See, large classes are there in various places. There also, you have students which are close to hundreds or so in a classroom. Small classes are also there, but then large classes are also. So, and then the professor gives the lectures. But then environment as such, if I compare between IITB and other places, there is not much difference. I would say that the students over here are having an advantage compared to the students elsewhere, because over there, unless you are in a dorm where all the dorm is like in a dormitory, is like in a hostel over here, you don't have to worry about who cooks the food, who cleans the vessels, and take care of the laundry and those things, right? Laundry, of course, you have to do. So you do have a lot more time. But then when it comes to elsewhere, many times all the students are on their own. You have to take care of all these daily chores as well. So in that sense, I would say, if you really make a one-to-one comparison, study environment over here is a lot more favorable for the student. Or the other side, they have to essentially take care of the entire things. And then how you manage within that time is definitely boils down to your individual approach. Yeah, with respect to UGs, I have had only very limited success stories, but then there are many others with whom the UGs have done well and then have done good amount of work. In fact, excellent work also. One or two of my students also have done excellent work. So it all comes to how much driven is the student in many cases. So if the student is driven, and if the advisor can, because you see the amount of time that a UG student can devote to research is significantly shorter than the amount a PhD student does. So when the time is short, it's very essential that the professor or the faculty gives very, very well-defined problems. It should not be that you join someone and then you worry about, okay, which problem you are going to solve. In that case, that time duration of 3 months or 6 months may not be good enough. So if the problem is well-defined, then the only limiting factor is the commitment shown by the student. And all those students who have shown such commitment, as far as I know, have done excellent research, even in UGs. Right? So from the student community, if you want to demand, it would be better, well-defined problems from the faculty. If the problem is well-defined, come on, you guys are excellent problem solvers, right? Within that time frame, you could solve that, right? So if you really want to move it to a different level, probably it's a approach from both sides. Clearly defined problems from the faculty and a lot more commitment from the student is all that we need. Yeah, so that like these things also do change with time. Like why did I choose academy over industry? If I look back, even when I moved to US for doing my PhD, I was determined that I'm going to come back. Now once that decision is there, it's like once you put a condition, and if you meet that condition, okay, then there are only certain options, right? Then you are trying to optimize within that. So once you decide to come back to India, and if that is what your long-term goal, then probably over here there aren't that many options which are better than academics. Okay. So that is a very basic kind of an argument. And of course, I do enjoy teaching, and I have enjoyed explaining things in a simple manner to students. So I thought that is my cup of tea. Why not give a try? So and then over the years, as I have taught, I've started to enjoy it even better and better. And on that aspect, I should say, looking back, influences of few people have been very, very crucial when it comes to teaching to me, as far as the different people would have been there's no single template or anything, but then there have been few instructors who have helped me to approach teaching in a maybe in a slightly different way. And if I may name, one of them is Professor Mark Lundstrom from Purdue University, and he was in my thesis committee, and his lectures I enjoyed. I enjoyed in the sense that, of course, you might have a reference textbook to teach from. There might be some derivations in the textbook. Most cases, he never relied on those derivations which are there in the textbook. Everything was sort of, tried to explain in the class using some symbol models with alternate symbol derivations, which are many of them were his own. And that gives a better insight. And the other, so I also tried in certain instances to do that. And in some cases, I have found that one can do a far better job than what is there in textbooks in terms of conveying the message. And similarly, Professor Ashraf Alam, who was my PhD advisor, has been a major influence, I should say, particularly because the way he approached research in terms of defining a problem, insisting on that, you solve that elegantly, even if the in-between process, you might have arrived at the solution in a not so elegant manner. At the end, you should go back and then figure out a better way to present the result. And at the same time, insisting that all results and other things should be eventually spend enough time thinking about it, understanding it, and you should be able to convey the result in such a manner that a reasonably bright undergraduate student should be able to understand. Right. So the research should be for the masses, not for the elite, essentially. So those have really made a significant impact in terms of and have often forced me to explore whether the material could be taught in an even simpler manner while retaining the essential the essential the aspects in that. And on a related tone, I should say, I was greatly helped by the fact that when I started teaching at IIT Bombay, the very first course that I taught, I was fortunate to share it with Professor Wasi. And then, when you are new and there is a batch of 140 students for you to teach, you are confused whether one should go for the PowerPoint presentation or Blackboard teaching and other things. Professor Wasi at that time sort of, indicated that Blackboard teaching is far better. In fact, it might suit, and you need not force yourself to be too perfect. and that has actually helped me. So I have enjoyed Blackboard teaching since then. So it's also when it comes to whether teaching versus industry, it's at the end it's a personal question, which you may like one way or the other. One one may not be even able to put that to words. Something goes with the personality trait also in one way or the other. But then many things contributed to, and then that's how I came to this. Yeah, so that is unfortunately, I should say, there aren't that many in the sense that because we, especially when it comes to undergraduate teaching, and if it is a core course, you are a little bit pressed in the sense that you have a certain amount of material to cover, right? And there is not much time to of course, once in a while you may tell a story or something, a funny incident and other things, but then not too much. But then in that sense, I should say, one incident that really amused me at that time was, again, I'll relate to something what happened in my graduate classes. I mentioned about Professor Mark Lindstrom. So he taught us a course on transistors, and then once he gave an assignment which had significant amount of, which required significant amount of work, derivations, some simulations and other things. It was a really time-consuming one. Okay, and then a couple of lectures later, professor comes to the class, and then he says that maybe a week later or so, said that okay, there's this other assignment due, and which is to be submitted by so and so deadline. And one guy from the class, he gave a sudden retort, "How bad is it?" And then everyone starts laughing. And Professor Lundstrom that day laughed so much that his face literally became sort of red. And I was also amused, to hear that, because we typically don't express as freely as like that to our teachers. We seldom see that, and not even in a classroom environment. But then the guy, he asked this question, and no one felt offended. Even the professor himself was taken to so much of laughter that it was a very funny incident. And when I taught the course EE112 the first time, usually I don't know whether it happens with other faculty. What happens with me is that most of the time when I teach a course for the first time, the very first exam that you give somehow ends up the hardest exam that you would be giving in that duration of say 3 course offerings. So that midsem exam that I gave was on the tougher side. It's not because the questions are tough, because you are a new commodity to the students also. They have not seen your question paper before. There is no template to rely on, and the exam was on the tougher side, kind of. And the next day I came to the lecture hall. This is this big auditorium, the lecture hall, and one guy who sat at the back asked more or less the same question to me. I forgot his name, but I can very well recollect his face. How tough is the exam expected to be? And then I was lost for words to. I did give some reply, but then I was really surprised that and I appreciated that one can be bit daring and ask a very tough question. So that was one incident, I should say, that was really sort of was unexpected to me. Yeah. There are significant amount of differences, right? And then when you pursue a PhD, your life literally can be hell or heaven, depending upon the kind of person whom you are working with, your advisor, for example. Not example, for advisor himself. So in that sense, I was fortunate to do my graduate studies with Professor Alam. who just the year before also he moved to academics from Bell Labs, and he was like he displayed. If I look back, he displayed exceptional maturity and patience with students at that time. And then I did. I was a reasonably good student when it comes to academics, like courses and all. I have done reasonably well in IITB also, and even over here the MTech research I did rather very well. There were some interesting publications which came out, and then I moved to so the style of research, style of solving a problem and other things can vary a lot between people to people. And initially I had some teething issues. Right? You are in a new place, you have to do, you are not worried about you have to cook, you have to do all the daily household things, you have to be a TA, grade students' answer scripts twice a week, spend 20 hours a week checking the answer scripts. And the research was not going very well initially. So in the initial few semesters, I was like a very kind of a frustrated graduate student, I should say. And to his credit, Professor Alam those days, used to talk to me when we go for even if it is like going for a coffee and other things. He used to talk rather candidly to me, and a few things that he said, in fact, turned out to be immensely precious later on. And one such thing was that there are certain things that you love to do, and there are certain other things that you can you complete. Well, either you do the things that you love, or you love the things that you do. Let me repeat it again. You either you want to do the things that you love, or you love the things that you do. And that sort of was an eye opener to me. And gradually I came to realize the interesting aspects of the problem that I am working in. So if you want to be passionate, if you want to make a difference, then you have to. There is no other way. You have to love the things that you do. It may be for your eventual interest might be something else, but then for that particular moment of time and other things, you have to show commitment. You have to essentially love the problem that you are doing. Then that spurs imagination. It may diversify into different directions, and then you will always come up with interesting results. So when it comes to PhD and all graduate research, it's very essential that one should be, if there is an option, and you hope and pray that maybe you end up with a person who is very, very understanding and accommodating. And don't worry too much about if that broad field is of your interest, don't be too specific about that. I want this particular sub problem itself. You start with something, solve, learn, and as you go, you'll be able to even identify and define more and more interesting problems as you go. So don't be too much specific. If that broad area is good enough, is more or less to your liking, then whatever problem that you can identify first, you may want to solve it. And it all it's essentially important in the sense that none of us are going to, most likely, none of us are going to work on the same topic for the entire life, especially for you, students like you. You are getting to say maybe 20 years of age or something like that. And our life expectancy is unless some unfortunate things happens, we don't know about how Corona is going to affect, but still we may live up to easily. The average life expectancy is 80 years. So you have about half a century of time to do what you want to do, research or whatever it is. And it's very unlikely that you'll be working on the same problem for 50 years. Sometimes you are fortunate, if that might happen. So one eventually will have to move from one topic to the other, maybe after every decade, after every 5 years or so. So insisting too much on one particular finely defined aspect is on an average not a good strategy. It's always essential that you you come to grips with how to solve a problem, how to solve a not so well defined problem. And once you get a hang of it, then it's as if you are you have been there, done that. If you want to wish to move to a different field, you can confidently do so. So when it comes to graduate research, the important aspect is that you have to learn to acquire the skills which would help you to pick interesting problems, solve, and communicate. And to that, maybe a little bit of flexibility is always good. You are sitting on opposite sides of a table. There is, I should say, there is not much change as such. Of course, when it comes to classroom teaching, there is entire role reversal. But as far as research is concerned, it really doesn't there is not that much of a distinction between a student and then a student who is doing the research as well as the advisor who is being involved in it. To me, because as a student, you have to worry about the problem, and as my advisor used to, he was also keen on how the progress goes, was very much a hands-on person. So, and I also do the same. It's not that when it comes to research, I leave the student to find it, the problem and solve it themselves, and then at the end demand excellently written answer scripts. No, none of us are probably not like that. So here, when it comes to research, it's always you are involved in that research with the student. There is not much difference, except that you are a senior person. You have been there. You have seen many stuff. You have solved previous problems. So that experience sort of helps in terms of figuring out what might be the most interesting aspect and how to tell the story and other things. So that experience helps. Other than that, when it comes to research, it is not a teacher-student relation when it comes to research. It's more like, colleagues, one is a bit more experienced than the other, and then you are trying to, it's a joint effort. Of course, when it comes to teaching, it is, indeed, I agree, this is a 360-degree change. And many a time what helps is that if you try to think in terms of how a typical student would receive what you are going to explain, that sort of helps. In that sense, even teaching becomes only, it's like you are telling a story or you are selling an idea. You are not trying to, you are trying to sort of, essentially sell it to the student that this is a interesting idea and how it can be approached. So that teaching is also somewhat, I should say, a lot more different than the teaching that one would see in school, where it is a little bit more top heavy. Here, one can approach it in different ways. It can be even in a discussion mode, or if appropriately from, it is exploration of a puzzle. You can set it as a puzzle and then seek views and then see how a solution could be attempted. So approaches like this essentially narrow down the perspective or differences in perspective between a student and the teacher. If it is an exploration of a puzzle, of course the teacher knows the answer, but then you are among a group and then you are setting the problem, then you are trying to see how it could be solved and how accurate is the solution and other stuff. So I should say within that approach, it is not a it's not a 360-degree change, and with that approach, it is also very much similar to the kind of research that one would do. So it goes sort of hand in hand. One feeds off to the other in many ways. see, the motivation is, it's also again very subjective, right? Maybe it's some sort of a glory, maybe some fame or something like that. It's not always monetary aspects as such. So maybe times have changed. Like, we don't really have to take so much of adventurous things these days. So the level of motivation might be different, and what motivates also. But at the end, what I feel is that one factor that might be acting as a motivating element to various people would be that they just want to grab their own place, right? It might be even that you want to show that you are not in a shadow, or you are not you are distinctly different, and then you have enjoyed, you are able to succeed in whatever endeavor that you want to. So when put at that level, then it doesn't you are essentially trying to achieve excellence. You want to have your own place where you would be seen apart from the crowd. And many cases, I feel that might be what drives people in terms of motivation. For example, you may even we can try to see some examples. For example, you have seen kids, right? Families would have, there are many families with single kid. So this analogy won't hold there. Like if there are two kids or something like that, you would always find that the second kid, more or less, is a bit more competitive and a bit more stubborn, maybe. What is that there? Because what motivates them is that they want the same thing as what their elders are going to get. And then so at the very basic level of a child itself, the motivation is something that they want to achieve something. They want to be counted at the same level, or even better than most. And when it comes to finding motivation, so this is a broad thing which maybe may or may not be easy to understand, and maybe many people may not even agree to that. How should one find motivation is a directly relevant question. So here also, especially with respect to the student community, we will say that, look, things are not interesting and other stuff, things. So how could one approach that? Where there are n number of things, of them only certain might look interesting, and then there is no motivation to study. We often hear this topic is not interesting and other stuff. So that is why you are not able to study. Some other topic is very interesting, so you can study. So here also, I would say that if you try to approach this and then deal it with that, the short phrase which I picked up from my advisor, there are only two options for you. One is that, or a combination of that. You love the things, you do the things that you love, or you love the things that you do. So when it comes to we are at the end supposed to do multitasking at various levels, various things are done. So you have to figure out what is the appropriate relevance of each of those tasks, and take them as a challenge. Sometimes some of those aspects you may not like it 100%, but then it needs to be done. So that is a challenge, right? And then see how you can rise up to the challenge and then get it done. So if you approach it that way, there may be certain things which all of these are challenges, and what is that you want to find yourself to, that you run away from certain challenges and you undertake only a few other challenges, or you as a person you tackled all of them. Well, some of them were not of your liking, but then after tackling this level of challenges, you went to the next level where you pursued whatever that is of most interest to you. So that motivation should be can be directly connected to how you perceive and what is the relative importance of all this, and which way you want to deal with them, whether you want to fight them all or you want to fight only a few. So depending upon the approach that you take, the motivation will be sort of inbuilt. You don't have to look elsewhere. Now, let's try to approach this. There are many things that you have to worry. As students, you worry about how you perform in the quiz, the midsum, and other stuff. And then at the end, you worry about what grade you are going to get. And if things are not as per the expectations, then there could be some sort of dejection, reaction, and other things. So the first thing that I would want to tell you is that, one should not be too particular about certain things. In put in other way, some of you would be watching Korean serial, Korean movies, K-pop, and other things, right? So last year also there was this one drama serial which came out in a Korean drama, and the title is "It is okay not to be okay." I have not seen it, but I have seen the trailer. Apparently, it is having good reviews. Maybe if I get some time, I might as well try this out. But then the title is very catchy. It is okay not to be okay, and that is more or less in tune with the kind of impression that I got from Professor Vasi when I started to teach. It's okay not to be perfect. So in that sense, we need not aim at one should of course aim to achieve excellence in everything. But if certain things that does not come through, we need not take it too much to the heart, or rather put it in different ways. I would say is that you should not, as students or as a human being, you should never worry about things which are not in your control. All that I'm saying is that, let me repeat again, you should never worry about things which are not in your control. I'm not saying that you should forget about all those aspects. You worry about the things which are in your control, where you can make a difference. And if there is something that where you have no chance of making a difference or influencing it, there is no point in that aspect being in your head, bugging you and dragging your performance down. And a very simple example is you have given the exams and other things. And then what cutoff the instructor is going to put is, in an ideal sense, is not in the control of the student. Right? The instructor might put it 90, 85 or so, depending upon the distribution and other things. All that you can do is about your own performance. Okay. Once you have done that, done your you've given all that you can for the exams and other things, some of them might go bad. Then what grade you are going to get, per se, you should not be worried about. Because the grade eventually is not going to be in your control. It all depends upon where the instructor is going to put the cutoff. And how much ever you worry, how much ever you spend the sleepless nights and other things, you cannot make any difference to that. So essentially, as students who are feeling pressure from multiple aspects, you may want to clearly figure out what are the things that you should be worrying about. Only worry about those things where you can make a difference, where your actions are going to make a difference. So once you can approach your life with this perspective, I think many uncertainties will become will drop themselves off in terms of their severeness. And also, it is also not a bad idea to be confused at times. Right? There might be many things okay, you want to do this or that and other things, you are confused. It's perfectly okay to be confused. If you are not at all confused, that says only two things. One, you are extremely brilliant, everything is evident to you. The other is that you don't even realize the complexities, so you are still happy. So if you look back human history, it is those people who were thoroughly confused who made differences, right? For example, one can consider Gautam Buddha, right? So he was really confused, and out came his thoughts and other things, which later on became Buddhism. So it's okay to be confused, but you should be able to approach it with a clear head and pull out threads of coherent thought, threads of clarity you should be able to pull out. So being confused doesn't necessarily mean that you're bad. It's perfectly natural, but one should be able to figure out lines of threads of clarity from that. And the last thing that I may want to tell is that, like, you may feel that we need to learn to accept not so great performances in a graceful manner, right? It may not be a failure, like, it need not be a failure, but then not so great performances. In the sense that each of you, if you feel that, like, whenever you are in trouble, your mood is down and other things, you may just want to take or evaluate yourself. Where do you stand? There are about 6 billion people or so. And given your upbringing, the kind of facilities that you enjoy and other stuff, where do you find yourself? Are you in the bottom half, the top quarter, or even that, like, the top 1% or so? So whenever you feel that, like, you are things are not going right for you, you just have to look down the ladder and then see that how fortunate you are to have been born in a time of reasonable stability, maybe with supporting family, and you are enjoying all these facilities, with which, like, a vast majority of the human population would have been even not been able to imagine. So once you realize that, then you will sort of figure out, okay, all these worries and other things that you are having are, like, okay, they have their own relevance, but they are mostly misplaced. Most of you just have no right, let me repeat again, no right to feel bad about it, because you guys are so fortunate on multiple accounts. And there are, like, those vast majority of humanity who are really unfortunate. So given this, you need not, like, you should not be over amplifying your small shortcomings, but try to improve, even if there are, like, certain things may not go as per your wish and other things. Well and good, like, you have to be take it in its own spirit. Don't worry that much, right? You are essentially way more fortunate than most others. So with that, like, probably I should kind of end. My messages are only 2 or 3. The first one is what I have said, right? You either do the things that you love or love the things that you do. Whatever that you are doing it, like whether it's course X, Y, or C, take that as a challenge and ensure that you can stand up to that challenge. That doesn't mean that, like, that is going to be your favorite problem or nothing. Nothing. No one is forcing you. All of these are challenges. Try to address the challenges in an even manner. The second thing is that, what was the second thing that I said? Yeah, don't worry about things which are not in your control, right? If you are worried about things and if it is giving you sleepless nights on a continuous manner, probably, like, you are giving too much priority to that. 1 or 2 days is fine. Like, even in research, if you are so much bugged by some things, like, you may not get sleep for a few days. Some other issues might be bugging you. It's okay to get sleepless nights once or twice. In fact, like, before teaching BJT for the first time, I have had a couple of sleepless nights. How am I going to sell this complex stuff to the students? So few days of sleepless nights are fine. But then if you are bothered, like, if you are getting this on a continuous manner, you have to evaluate your priorities. And then the last thing is that, look, most of you do not have any right to lament. You are in that top percentile of those fortunate souls to enjoy the kind of, like, the life that you are having, your family, your parents, the friends that you are having, and the rest of things. Yeah, so that is the 3 messages that I want to convey. And before we sort of wrap up, one more thing that I want to tell you. You all are, like, young. I was at your phase maybe 18-20 years back, and there is one thing that you should realize. Like, now you might be too busy. Okay, this grade, that internship here, this and other things. You may not be even spending enough time enjoying the company of your, like, the batchmates. So you may want to realize one thing: for a vast majority of you, the moment you are out from this place, the chances of you getting these many number of people with similar interest, similar schedule, and essentially same similar interest and other things in one instance is going to be pretty rare. Right? Life kind of diverges. You move from here, then you all are going to take different directions. Of course, you will meet new people, but the number of new people that you are going to meet and the number of new friends that you are going to get is on a decreasing trend. Those of you who go to graduate studies, you stay back in university and other things, may be fortunate to get more and more number of significant number of friends as such. But otherwise, the group of people that you guys are going to interact with are going to be your best buddies for the rest of your life. You will find many other interesting people later on, but then this is one group to whom you will be able to reconnect at any age without any significant issues as such. So don't miss out this chance. While pursuing worries about grade and other things, don't miss out on the interactions with your friends, the time that you are going to do spend with your friends. You will be cherishing this for a long time, and mark my words, out from this place, you are never going to get these many number of friends at a time, right? So these friendships and other things that you are going to have are indeed something to be cherished, and make sure that you talk to people, you talk to your friends, and then do reach out to those who might even need help. Yeah, there could be many other things that I could say, but then probably I might stop rather than this getting into digressing in various different directions.